I am Dominique. And I am 32 years old. The invitation said the Glass Peak Resort was a palace of light. A testament to opulence perched on the frozen spine of Aspen. But standing in the coat-check atrium, all I could feel was the biting cold. My mother, Jacqueline, had snatched my invitation the moment I arrived. Her fingers like talons on silk. She shoved a plastic badge into my hand that read temporary staff and pointed to the rack of heavy furs. "Don't embarrass us," she hissed, her breath clouding in the frigid air. "You stay here. You take coats. And if you dare step foot inside the main hall, I will tell every investor in this room about your little mental episodes. Do you understand?" Inside, through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I could see my sister Sierra laughing, warm and golden in the glow of 1,000 candles. She was celebrating her engagement to Garrett, a man whose gambling debts I had quietly erased just last week. Out here, the wind howled through the drafty sliding doors, cutting through my thin blouse. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was the help. But what my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just standing in the cold. I owned the cold. I owned the glass. I owned the very ground they were dancing on. And the temperature was about to drop. Before I tell you exactly what happened when the temperature dropped inside that glass palace, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stood there, holding a cashmere coat that smelled of old money and arrogance. And I knew what anyone watching would say. They would ask why. Why would Dominique, a woman who built a clean energy empire valued at $1.2 billion, agree to wear a plastic badge and serve the people who tormented her? Why not just leave? Why not scream? An outsider would call it weakness. They would call me a doormat. But they don't understand the training. My mother, Jacqueline, didn't raise children. She raised assets. And she didn't use a whip to break me. She used something far more effective. Disappointment. The quiet, crushing weight of being the difficult one. The selfish one. The one who ruined the family aesthetic just by existing. Since I was 5 years old, I have been serving a life sentence for the crime of being born. I was programmed to believe that my existence was a debt I could never fully repay. And being reasonable was the only way to make the interest payments. So I paid. I paid in silence. And I paid in cash. When Sierra wanted to be an influencer but didn't have the followers, I funded the marketing teams and the trips to Dubai. When my father, Douglas, made bad investments, I quietly filled the accounts so he could keep his country club membership. And Garrett, the man Sierra was celebrating tonight last week, his creditors threatened to expose his $2.3 million in gambling debts. I wired the money before breakfast. I didn't do it for him. I did it because my mother sighed and said it would break Sierra's heart if the engagement failed. I paid to keep the peace. I paid to be allowed to stay in the orbit of a family that only tolerated me when the checks cleared. But standing here, feeling the wind bite through my skin, I realized the price of peace had just gone up. And I was done paying it. My mother thought she had banished me to the edge of her perfect world. She thought this resort, the Glass Peak, was just another expensive venue she had rented to show off her bloodline. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know that 3 months ago. My holding company acquired this property. She didn't know that the walls, the floors, the very air they were breathing belonged to me. And she certainly didn't know about the smart grid. It was my proprietary technology. A system designed to optimize energy consumption in extreme environments. It controlled everything. The locks, the elevators, the lights, and most importantly, the heat. I wasn't the help. I wasn't the daughter they were ashamed of. I was the landlord. And I was looking at a room full of tenants who were very, very overdue on their rent. The door to the main hall slid open, releasing a burst of warmth and the scent of expensive perfume. Jacqueline stepped into the atrium, wrapping her fur stole tighter around her shoulders. She didn't look at me with gratitude for managing the coats of her 300 guests. She looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet she couldn't quite scrub out. "Dominique," she sighed, adjusting her diamond earring. "You're looking sullen. It's ruining the vibe." People can see you through the glass. You know, you look like a funeral attendant. I'm cold. Mother, I said, my voice flat. It's 5 degrees out here. Oh. Stop being dramatic. You're bringing everyone down. She waved a hand dismissively toward the catering tents set up in the parking lot, flapping in the wind. Douglas and I decided it's best if you don't come inside for dinner. There's no seat for you at the head table. And frankly, having you loom over the guests would just be awkward. Grab a boxed lunch from the staff tent. Eat quickly. People will be leaving soon. And you need to be ready to retrieve their furs. Behind her, Sierra appeared, giggling, a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. She leaned against the doorframe, snapping a quick selfie with me in the background. Ah, look at Domi working hard, she said. Her voice slurred slightly. Don't worry. I'll save you a piece of cake. If there's any left. They laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound. The sound of people who have never known a moment of consequence in their lives. And in that moment, the chain snapped. It wasn't a violent break. It was quiet. It was the sound of a contract expiring. For 30 years, I had upheld my end of the bargain I served. I paid. I endured. And in exchange, they pretended to love me, but they had just voided the terms. Okay, I said. Jacqueline blinked, surprised by the lack of a fight. Good. At least you're finally learning your place. She turned on her heel, ushering Sierra back into the golden warmth, and the heavy glass doors slid shut, sealing me out in the cold once again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the Glass Peak administrative app. It was a simple interface, a black screen with white text, designed for absolute control. I wasn't just the owner, I was the super admin. I navigated to the Access Control tab. Beside the entry for Event, Sierra and Garrett Engagement, there was a green status bar that read, VIP Access Active. I tapped it. A menu slid up. I selected Revoke All. Instantly, the small LED lights on the elevators leading to the heated suites turned from inviting green to hard red. The electronic locks on the main banquet doors engaged with a heavy, mechanical thud. They weren't locked in, they could leave anytime they wanted. But they couldn't get back into the VIP lounges, the private suites, or the heated tunnels. They were now guests in the common areas only. Then, I opened the Environmental Systems tab. The current temperature in the main hall was set to a balmy 72 degrees. I tapped the preset labeled Eco Preservation Mode. It was a setting meant for unoccupied nights to save power, dropping the ambient temperature to 55 degrees Fahrenheit within minutes. System updating. The screen read, Eco Mode engaged. Above me, the hum of the high-capacity heating vents sputtered and died. The warm yellow recessed lighting flickered and shifted to a cool, clinical white, designed for cleaning crews, not galas. I watched through the glass as the first shiver rippled through the crowd. They didn't know it yet, but the party was over. The landlord had just turned off the utilities. It started with a shiver. I watched from the atrium as a woman in a backless emerald gown rubbed her arms, glancing up at the vents. Then a man in a tuxedo frowned, checking his watch, likely wondering why he could see his own breath. The panic didn't hit all at once. It crept in like the frost now forming on the corners of the glass panels. A group of investors, men who had laughed when my mother made me hold their coats, headed for the elevators to the VIP cigar lounge. They pressed the call buttons. The lights flashed angry red. Access denied. They tried the keypad. Invalid code. They turned to the main doors, leading to the heated banquet suites. Locked. They weren't trapped in the building. The main exits to the parking lot were wide open, but they were locked out of the luxury. They were locked out of the warmth. They were forced to congregate in the main hall, huddled together like penguins. As the temperature plummeted toward 55 degrees, my mother was frantic. I could see her shouting at a waiter, gesturing wildly at the thermostat. But the waiter just shrugged. Helpless. The system was locked out at the root level. Time for the entertainment, I whispered. I tapped the media override icon on my screen. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Glass Peak were designed with smart glass technology. Usually, they offered a crystal-clear view of the mountains. But with a single command, they could turn opaque, transforming the entire room into a 300-degree projection screen. The room went pitch black. The murmuring crowd fell silent, their faces illuminated only by the pale blue glow of their smartphones. Then, the walls exploded with light. It wasn't a montage of Sierra and Garrett's love story. It was a forensic audit. Huge, high-definition documents scrolled across the glass. Bank statements, wire transfers, and right in the center, a photograph of Garrett, smiling that charming, empty smile of his. Beside his face, a figure in bold red text. $8.5 million. What is this? I heard Sierra scream, her voice thin and terrified. The audio system kicked in, playing a recorded deposition I had gathered weeks ago from the forensic accountant I hired. The voice boomed through the freezing hall. Subject Garrett Thorne has systematically embezzled $8.5 million from the Green Future Charity Fund over a period of 3 years. The funds were used to cover personal gambling losses and high-risk venture capital failures. Garrett looked like he might vomit. The guests recoiled from him as if he were contagious. The Green Future Fund was my charity. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my money. From the very cause I dedicated my life to. While my mother clapped and called him a visionary. But I wasn't done. The screen flickered and changed. Now, it displayed a series of emails. The sender, Jacqueline. The recipient, Priscilla. The subject lines were brutal. Surrogacy contract. Payment, schedule. Non-disclosure agreement. The text scrolled slowly, large enough for everyone to read. You will carry the child. And you will disappear. Sierra needs this baby to secure the trust fund. If you tell anyone the child is yours, the $100,000 is gone. And I will ruin you. A collective gasp sucked the remaining oxygen out of the room. The cold was no longer just physical. It was in the air. In the realization of what these people were, I pressed the PA intercom button on my phone. My voice filled the hall. Calm. Amplified. And icy. You all look so cold, I said. It's strange, isn't it? You have always praised the pristine, frozen beauty of this mountain. You prided yourselves on being cool, detached, above it all. But you forgot something. You only survived up here because I kept the furnace running. I kept the lights on. I covered the debts. You lived in a perpetual summer, paid for by my labor and my silence. I watched my mother spin around, looking for the source of the voice. Her eyes wild with terror. I am simply withdrawing my subsidy. I continued. I am turning off the artificial warmth you never appreciated. This isn't cruelty. Mother, this is just the weather report. Welcome to the real temperature of your actions. Jacqueline was the first to move. She didn't run. She marched. Her heels clicking against the frozen marble, with the rhythm of a woman who believes she can outshout reality. She slammed her hand against the glass door of the atrium. Her face twisted in a mask of fury that I had seen 1,000 times before. But this time, the glass didn't shatter. It just vibrated. I tapped the unlock command for the main atrium door only. It slid open with a hiss. Turn it off, she screamed, storming into my sanctuary of cold. Turn off the lights, turn off the screens. Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are humiliating us in front of the board. In front of the investors. Behind her. Sierra stumbled in, clutching her 6-month-old son, Leo, against her chest, to shield him from the draft. She looked pale, her eyes darting between the damning emails still scrolling on the giant glass walls and the woman standing next to me. I hadn't come alone. Standing in the shadows of the coat racks, wrapped in a heavy parka I had provided, was Priscilla. I'm not humiliating you, Mother, I said calmly. I'm reading the meeting minutes. You wanted a legacy. You wanted blood to secure the trust. Here she is. I stepped aside. Priscilla moved into the light Douglas's nose. Jacqueline's eyes. But none of the polish money buys. She looked forged. Not raised. Who is she? Sierra whispered, clutching the baby. Nobody, Jacqueline screamed. A plant. A lie. I'm your sister, Priscilla said quietly. And I'm Leo's mother. The room froze. Sierra stared at the projected emails. Surrogacy contract. NDA. You said the donor was anonymous, she said, shaking. That the surrogate was a stranger. I did what was necessary, Jacqueline snapped. You couldn't give this family an heir. I fixed it. That was when Sierra collapsed, not in rage, but in truth. You didn't fix anything, she sobbed. You bought a baby to hide my infertility. When I told you, you didn't comfort me. You told me to fix it before the wedding. She turned to me. Being the disappointment hurts. But being the perfect one, that's a cage. I just wanted to be enough. Jacqueline stood silent, stripped of control. I want to go home, Sierra whispered. You don't have one here, I said gently. And you don't have a trust fund. Jacqueline recovered, pulling out a document. I cut you out years ago. The Sterling Family Trust $1. 2 billion. Irrevocable. Generation skipping. It goes to the first biological grandchild. Leo. I didn't argue. I projected the document, instead. Section 4. I said evenly. Beneficiary. The first living issue of the settler's body. No adoption. Only blood. She smiled. Exactly. No, I said. Leo isn't Sierra's biological son. Sierra is infertile. Leo is Priscilla's son. Silence. And Section 9. I continued. Trusteeship transfers to the beneficiary's biological parent. Equal. Jacqueline went ash white as the paper fell from her hands. You built this to exclude me, I said, and handed everything to the woman you treated like nothing. I turned to Priscilla. Congratulations. You're the sole trustee. She owns nothing, unless you allow it. Jacqueline collapsed. Sirens cut through the hall. Garrett was arrested. Sierra walked to Priscilla and handed her Leo. He sleeps better if you hum, she said softly. It wasn't a handoff. It was a release. Jacqueline muttered on the floor. This isn't how it ends. Get up, Priscilla said flatly. You're wrinkling my carpet. I left. Outside. The cold felt clean. Inside. They froze, in their lies. I deleted my family contacts. Drove away. I walked away from $1 billion to buy my freedom. What's the price of your peace?